Now we just kind of show up and wing it.
Brace yourself for the #1 rated daytime bootstrap SaaS Honey Badger themed podcast in the Pacific Northwest. This is FounderQuest.
So today we have a special episode of FounderQuest. We have John Nunemaker with us, and instead of Star's taking a break today, and Josh and I are going to be chatting with John and talking about the fun things that John is doing. John, I gotta start off by saying that I'm a huge fan. Like, I've been following your work since the Harmony days back at Ordered List. I guess that was, I don't know when that was, 2000 something?
7, 8, yep.
Yeah. So I think I got introduced to you through the Rails community, being back in the early group. So I don't remember how exactly we bumped into each other back then, but I remember Harmony was pretty cool and the other stuff you did with the Ordered List.
Yeah, I was newer to the Rails world back then. So like both of you were like Ruby celebrities to me. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool to have you here.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I feel the same way like about you guys, especially I remember was it Rails Kits? Like I remember I remember that. I remember a bunch of the stuff back in the day, and like is it STYMPY or something, like website? Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh yeah. Yep. That stuff sticks out. So
nice, cool. Fanboys all around. Awesome. And you're a prolific open source author. We have, in fact, 2 of your gems in our app right now. We have Noons and we have HT Party running in our app. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah. I love Noons. Like, just I love the description of it. It's like, this is the monitoring I would add to your app if I was working with you.
Yeah, that I feel like stuff like that. I get lucky and like it sticks. But it's just like this moment where I'm like, I got to come up with some kind of a description. I really don't want to do this. What should I put? And then it's like, this is what I would do. I would do this if I were you. Like, so I'm just going to put that as my description and peel out.
That's cool. So, but I think we're not going to talk about this much today, but I just wanted to toss this in here. I think one of the projects that you've done that I'm most interested in is probably one that there's least information out there about, and that's Haystack at GitHub.
Yeah. Hey, I can answer any questions related to that too, on air, off air, whatever you want. Yeah. Yep. I worked on that for a little while. I didn't build it, but I tuned it a bunch. So
remind me what Haystack does.
It was the exception tracker.
I remember now. Yeah. Cool. I've built a few of those.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have heard of exceptions, but
yeah, we do a little bit in that line. But yeah, I remember reading some of your blog posts about Haystack, and I thought I was kind of jealous. I was like, oh man, it'd be cool if we had GitHub as a customer. But I mean, yeah, I totally understand why you would have something totally internal and custom to what you do there at GitHub.
Yeah, I still always wonder if they still have it. I need to like reach out to people who are still there and ask. I'm always curious, like what technology has lasted and what hasn't, and stuff like that. So
yeah.
So how long have you been gone from GitHub?
I would say, hard to remember. I would say 2018, I think, is when I left. So it was right.
Okay.
It was like November. It was right after the Microsoft stuff went through. It happened to like coincide with like paternity leave ending for me and like all these, it just perfect timing. So all the stuff kind of came down at the same time. And so like my last day of paternity leave was a Friday, and that Friday was the day they closed the deal. And then that Monday I resigned and moved on to the next stuff. So I love GitHub. You can see behind me. No one listening can, but I have an Octocat behind me. My room is completely, office is stuffed with Octocats. I'm a huge fan still. I just am not a big company person really. So
yeah, totally can relate to that. I've never thrived in big companies. So
yep.
So yeah, getting acquired by Microsoft would make GitHub a pretty big company.
Yeah, and it was great. I mean, we were 45 through 50, and then watched it grow over 6-7 years to in the thousands.
Wow!
And it was just totally different than when we had started. So it was
no doubt.
Yeah, and that's kind of where Flipper, and Flipper Cloud and stuff like that even came from, was because I was working there, and not to like jump ahead or anything like that, but I was like, I know I'm not going to be a big company person, so I got to come up with some kind of a runway, because I'm the guy who runs out the clock in the fourth quarter. I'm very safe and conservative in my moves. So yep.
Ooh,
Nice.
I love that. So let's talk about that. That's very interesting.
You're in good company. That sounds a lot like Ben.
Yep. Yeah. But so basically it was like, Flipper itself, I started in like 2013 just as like for fun on the weekend, which was like a lot, HTTP party, a lot of gems like that. That's where they came from, was just like hacking around on the weekend or in the evenings. I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. And I've always been interested in feature flags because I worked on a long time ago. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but I worked on Words with Friends, the like Scrabble-like game for on the back end. So I didn't work on any iOS stuff, but worked on the back end. And every time I tried to roll out, I always joked that was that time period of my life. All I did was write caching for a year because it was just we scaled from like 50,000 requests a minute to like over 1 million. It was insane. Wow. And so we were like just trying to keep the service up. And that's where feature flags came in. It kept going down every time I tried to roll out this new caching, and the new caching was really important, and I couldn't get it to roll out because every time I added it, the whole site would just screech to a halt due to a cold cache. So that's when I was working with Jesse Newland. I don't know if you guys remember him from Rails. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So we were working together on it. We were like, we should do feature flags. Like he was like, check out this thing called Rollout. And so like I set it up and got it working, and we slowly rolled it out. And then I was just like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, so then a couple years later, though, I didn't love the API. I'm real picky about APIs and like, the way the code looks and the way it feels. And their examples used like $rollout equals or something, and dollar just made me, scrunch my shoulders and nose and everything. So at that point, I was like, I think I can do it better. And feel like how I always end up in open source is like, some kind of silly idea like that. It's usually like, you change one thing and then everyone's like, why did you make a new project? This is just one small change. But that's how it started. And it didn't get used by me for, I don't know how many years. It didn't get used at GitHub even. So I was at GitHub at that time, and it was probably 2015. Actually, when my son was born, I was on paternity leave with him. That's when it got added to GitHub. Two guys, Adam Robin and Rob Sandheim, added it. And so they were kind of working with me a little bit, but I was obviously like kind of off the grid at that point, struggling to figure out how to be a parent. So, but yeah, that's kind of how it came about, was like, then I just kind of played on the weekend and thought it was fun. And then a bunch of people started using it. I knew I just wanted to make it not tied to Redis because I've had, interactions there that weren't fantastic. And I like the idea of storing it everywhere. And so that's kind of, I was like, let's just make something that can talk to anything. And at that time, Rollout didn't. Now they have more of an adapter idea in theirs as well. But yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And then eventually those guys pulled it into GitHub, and I helped like tune it a little bit and help with that. And then from there, it just kept pulling my interest back. And so I just kept kind of playing with it.
That's cool. Yeah, we've used Rollout a little bit in Honey Badger. We don't do feature flags very often. We typically like deploy, if there's something that we feel is kind of dangerous, we will deploy it to our internal instance of Honey Badger first. And so we'll inflict it upon ourselves, make sure that it's stable and stuff before we unleash it. But every now and then we do have a feature flag, and Rollout's API, I think we're still using the old fashioned, activate user and stuff. And
maybe that's why we haven't used it as much. We're like afraid. We're afraid to interact with a global variable.
Exactly. And now, we have standard running all the time on our to length our code, right? And so now, even in VS Code, you can see it's like, oh, don't use that $sign. It's like, come on, give me a break, man.
In every other instance of life, the $sign is good. It's just like just in Ruby, where you're like, oh, this makes me feel bad.
Yeah. But then again, I came to Ruby from Perl. So, sometimes it's like, it's the kind of throwback, kind of makes you feel warm and fuzzy to have all those signals,
Yeah, that's still, it's probably not it's probably not great if your API is a linter error.
Yeah, that's probably bad news.
That's neat that you guys have an internal instance. So you use that for Honey Badger itself then? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, cool. I mean, it makes sense. So I just hadn't really thought about it.
It's pretty handy. Yeah. It's kind of like a production staging instance. Like it's live, taking a lot of traffic, like live production traffic, but yeah, we can kind of play around with it.
We did that at Words of Friends. We had I think it was called a smoke instance, and it was same idea as like a canary or something. It was like kind of pre-feature flags, was like, we just had one thing that got like 5% of the traffic. And so we could roll out to that first. And if it went well, then we would tag it and roll it out to production and stuff.
That's which, a good idea.
Not the same, but kind of the same idea.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, one of the side effect benefits has been like now we have, so it's deployed in a separate region. So we're 100% AWS, and so our internal instance is in a different region. So it's obviously a different VPC, and everything is just completely separate from our production stuff. And we're big fans of like Ansible and Terraform. And so the nice side effect has been now we have this, good set of scripts in Terraform and Ansible to like spin up an entire stack, right? Pretty easily. So it's been a lot of fun to play with, kind of geek out on that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you said you said runway. That was like a trigger word for me. Like Josh said, like I'm totally into having backup plans and that sort of thing. So at some point, Flipper went from this fun open source project to maybe I'm going to do something else with it. So tell us about that.
Yeah, in 2017, I think it was 2017. GitHub had just exploded growth wise and stuff like that, and I was just kind of like feeling the big company, like where at a big company, and there's nothing wrong with this. This is just kind of the way it is. But like I feel like you spend a quarter of your time just telling everyone else what you're doing with the other portion of your time. And that was just starting to, wear on me. I just like to get in and make an impact. And it's really, it's difficult to make an impact that you feel is substantial at a company that's thousands of people. So, and I think part of it's just a mental issue because I see other people who like definitely make an impact. And I think they just maybe well suited to that. But yeah, for myself, I wasn't. So I was like, I got to come up with something else. And I'm like, I didn't really want to go back to consulting. So I was like, well, maybe I can come up with some kind of software, as a service on the side. I was trying to think of like what could possibly, I always have ideas. I have tons of things that I want to build. Like my problem is not a lack of ideas. It was just like, which would make sense. And then randomly, I think I saw, some flashy thing about Mike Perham and like hitting 1 million on Sidekick or something like that. And I was like, huh. And it just gave me like a little bit of like an idea. I was like, well, I wonder if like I have an open source project that could do that because I have several. They've, been, moderately successful. Like, but I was like, no one's going to pay for HTTP requests. That doesn't really make sense. I couldn't think of anything else that I had that would really like warrant that. And then I was like, oh, like Flipper, like one of the things that, you do is like, if you use Flipper, you set it up kind of on each project and it would be really nice. Like we had a web UI and stuff like that, but that web UI is always like, per environment and per project. So like if you have 8 projects, you got to have it mounted in 8 places. And if you have, development and then you have staging and you have production, then the feature data has got to be synced between them and like all these kinds of tedious things. And so I was like, I wonder if there's a way like I could do that. And so I kind of like started looking around and I saw, maybe within like a day, like I remember writing all the notes, but like within a week for sure, I saw Launch Darkly. And so they're like I would assume the powerhouse or pretty close in feature flags right now. And they got like 8 million in funding or something like that. And I was like, wow, okay, they've gotten way more since then. But I was like 8 million. I was like, wow. Okay. I'm like, that means, people are actually interested in this as a hosted thing, not just like so I kind of looked at their model and how they do it. And they open connections. It's almost like, like long polling, but it's not polling. I think it does actually have push, and I was like, well, I don't know if I really want to build that. That sounds really complicated. And I don't think people are going to trust me with an HTTP request in their main request thread on, that's not in Ruby for sure. You have 100 milliseconds just for being in Ruby and doing net HTTP. So I was like, I don't know. That seems hard to believe. Obviously, you guys have a lot of services that because, you have clients that are shipping all kinds of things to you and you have to come up with ways to do it in the background. And I'm fairly certain that I've spent a decent amount of time in the Honey Badger gem in the last 2 years, like looking at the threaded stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I was like, maybe this would work. And then like right after that, I saw Split.io came out and they announced like 7 million in funding. And again, I didn't want to bootstrap I didn't want to fund and I didn't want to go big and that kind of stuff. But I was like, if other people are paying, or like giving large sums of money to people doing this, that seems possible. So I kind of started hacking on some stuff. And at the same time, this guy, Alex Wheeler, he started contributing to Flipper and was like, it'd be really cool if there was like an HTTP API. And I was like, that sounds interesting, and this was a little bit before the cloud idea. And then he like put some pull requests together and I like, just was like, if it was me, I would change these things, but like, this looks pretty cool. And we had like a nice, back and forth, and built out a bunch of stuff to like just mount a rack app in Rails or in Sinatra or whatever. And you just have this HTTP API and it could, do its thing. And I was like, I bet I could just mount that in a Rails app, and then I would have a hosted service. And so it kind of started that way. So it was like just for fun. And then one of the other guys that I used to work with at GitHub, John Hoyt, he's John Magic everywhere online. He was like, I'll build it with you. He was looking just for some fun. So we started hacking on it. And then the Microsoft stuff went down, and we built it, and it was working. I started using it on SpeakerDeck. Like in the meantime, I had reacquired SpeakerDeck back from GitHub. And so I was like, we're using it there, and we were just kind of polling every 60 seconds and memoizing things in memory and stuff like that for performance. And then it was like, I think we could do this. There's more to this. And so we were like, all right, let's try and make it happen. And so we brought in a couple other people, and then eventually he and some of the other people ran out of time, and it ended up back as just myself and Steve Smith, who I was partners with at Ordered List pre-GitHub. So yeah, we were like, all right, let's try this. But then it just sat because Microsoft happened, and that was like kind of insane. And so I took a little bit of time off after that, and then rejoined Steve at BoxOut. And he had started a new company. So I basically rejoined him at his new company. And then, pushing that forward, we kind of just left Flipper in the background. We started using it a bunch, but didn't do anything with it. And then it was like, okay, we have this whole thing and it's working. We should really do something with it. But we actually launched SpeakerDeck before that, as a pro, a paid thing, in November, I think is when we did it. And people gave us some money to pay for that pro account. And we were like, whoa, this is really fun. We should do this on Flipper. We've had this, software that we've been using for 2 years with no problems. Maybe we should actually slap some billing on that. So Steve kind of did that over Christmas. And so then we just maybe a month ago released it so that anybody can sign up and start using it now.
I love that, slap some billing on it, by the way.
So that's totally
that's
comes,
the way.
Yeah. That comes from gauges. We actually launched back in the day when we had Harmony, we had, CMS. Well, if you have a CMS, you want stats. So we made gauges. Yeah. And so what was hilarious is we launched gauges with a 7-day free trial and no billing. And so we were like, we got 7 days. We can we can slap a billing system in. So that's really where, it's not the first time I've said slap a billing system in.
Right on.
Yeah, I love that. I've done that. It's I'll just push it out there, and if anybody wants to buy it, then I'll figure out how to get some money for it. And and if no one wants it saves you a lot of time, right?
Yeah, who wants to build a billing system that no one's going to put money into?
Never gets used.
Yeah.
Well, I remember back in the day using Spreedly, which was great because they, is mostly.
Oh yeah, I remember Spreedly.
Yeah, webhooks and stuff like that. But then they kind of moved more to being an interface to multiple gateways rather than the recurring billing stuff. And so I wasn't even sure. And then I went through a 7-year, entrepreneurial dark period where I worked at a huge company and was focused on that. I didn't pay attention to anything else. So, but Stripe Billing Portal is awesome. So that actually has covered for SpeakerDeck and Flipper. It's made it, it's 90% of what we would want. And the other 10% we can live without. So it would just be nice.
Yeah. And, eventually Stripe will build that 10%.
They will. Yeah. They probably already did. And I just haven't seen it yet. It's probably, or it's in the works. It'll be out next month at their rate. So.
Yeah, that's one thing, over time, I've become much more comfortable with the idea of depending on services for things as opposed to building it myself. And with AWS, it's anything you want, you just wait long enough, eventually it's going to show up. We've been getting more into using DynamoDB and other services that AWS has. And it's I wish it had this thing. And then 6 months later, it has that thing now. Oh, great.
And that ecosystem is so the only word is rich. It's crazy. They just let you do everything. SQS, SNS, all those. Yeah, they're really great. So
you got this Flipper Cloud going and you've got paying customers now because of your billing system, right?
We do. Yeah. So we have a few. We launched maybe a week ago. A month in all, I think. Yeah, we just had our first person who paid us a second time. This morning. I thought I got confused. Thank you. It's very exciting. I got confused for a second because I was oh, a new sign up, and then I was oh no, this is actually it's just the same person. Sending it again. So I think we have I was going to look before. I don't remember. It's probably like maybe $300 in seats right now. So I'm really okay with that. Like Speaker Deck, we launched maybe end of November. So basically December, which is, kind of Christmas time, and nobody's buying Speaker Deck accounts for Christmas for people, for stocking stuffers. So,
come on.
So yeah, I wasn't sure how that would do, but like, it's so far maybe 7,000 in revenue that it's generated, and it's up to almost 1,000 MRR. So, which I was like, if we can get to the expenses on that are around 1,000, like $1,200 a month or something like that for like the AWS and Heroku and stuff, all those kinds of things. And I was like, if we can get to that by like the end of the year, that would be amazing. Like just by the end of the year, if we get to like paying the bills on it, it's kind of just like a passion project. I just love Speaker Deck and I can't get rid of it. And so I'm like, if it makes money, that's great. If it just breaks even, that'd be fine. And we're like almost break even 3 months in. So that was kind of, I think, what got us really excited about Flipper too. We're like, shoot, these things, there are actually people out there that want to pay for software that solves their problems. Like, it's funny that you can forget that, but Box Out Sports, pays the bills and is doing really great. So it was kind of easy for us to kind of forget about that, like just kind of focus on that and not really diversify and try other stuff. So yeah, they're going pretty well. Like I don't have any complaints. So there's definitely like, it's brand new. So people are like, I don't know if I want to do this or not. It's brand new, or like, tell me more about your pricing. Cause pricing, you guys know, it's really difficult. Like that's probably a lot of iterations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Trying to get it right. And so that was a hard one, but I feel like you labor over it. And eventually you're like, the only thing that's going to make a difference is just putting something out there and getting feedback. So that's what we ended up doing. We were like, you know what? We realized we're putting ourselves out there at like half the price of LaunchDarkly and Split and all these other companies, but we're like, we feel like we can make lots of money at this, point. So, we'll see. Like, we'll just find out. And so far the feedback has been good. Maybe it's like a little bit high for some people and a little bit, they didn't even notice the price for other people. So
mm-hmm. That's good. That's a good place to be. I mean, if no one's complaining about the price, then you're priced too low, I think, right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
And it's nice to be the no-brainer option, I think, for the other end of the spectrum too. So yeah, that's a pretty good sweet spot to be in.
We found that like the pricing project is one that has never ended for us, and I don't think it ever does. Like I think you always are adjusting your prices to like what the current market is, and with competitors and stuff. Yeah.
How do you guys do that? I'd be super curious. Like, do you every time you roll out, do people you roll it out for new people, like the new pricing, and everybody else just stays on their current plan? Do you have like 800 different plans in Stripe, but you only show 2 of them on the website? Or I'm just curious.
that one.
all the above. Yeah. Yeah. We try to, do right by our customers, right? We don't want to push people into things that, it's like the Comcast thing, like Comcast, like, oh, by the way, your bill's going up. Like no one loves that. Right. So yeah, every time we do pricing, we just do it for new people. We typically don't announce it and make a big deal out of it because we just want to see, like, because we don't do A/B testing on our pricing. So basically, like Josh said, it's basically a full-time thing because for months leading up to a change, we're talking about it, thinking about it, and penciling it out, right? And then we make the change, and then for months after the change, we're like, okay, how did it go, and how's the revenue curve looking, and then we have had one round of price changes where we did go back to customers who are on our older plans and ask them to upgrade. Mm-hmm. When we switched from basically unlimited to metered based on traffic, like one of the reasons we switched was the new pricing was because some customers were using a whole lot of traffic and not paying us very much, right?
Yeah.
And so we did go back in some cases and say, look, we just can't continue to service your level of traffic, and here are some options, right? You could fix your bugs, or, you could pay us more, or you could just deal with some of their traffic going away. Like we'll cut you off at a certain point, right?
Yeah.
And those conversations were great, I think, because we like explained it clearly, to people, like, here's why things are changing. And I reached out individually to people. Like it wasn't like this mass thing. It was each account I emailed and said, hey, here's your traffic. Here's what we're talking about for new pricing. And here's some ways you can adjust it. And overall, the response was great.
Most of them, like the ones that you actually contacted, like especially the ones you contacted first, like the way you lay it out, like showing them their traffic and then showing them like how much we're making on them. Like by the end of it, they're apologizing to you.
Yeah.
That was a good email.
And we've just started, I think we made our last change in around May of last year. And now we're thinking again about, is that working? Do we need to make some tweaks? I just, on the receiving end, I don't know if you know about Pinboard. It's a bookmarking service.
Yeah, I use it.
Yeah, I love Pinboard. Yeah. I signed up way back in the day when he was selling it like a one-time fee. Yep. And I remember like his price went up by a penny for every customer that signed up. Yeah. And I got in, I think it was like, I don't know, $2.36 or whatever. And did you get his email? I just got an email from him this past week. And he's
interesting.
Big, long email. And I was like, I know what this email is. And it was like, hey, you're a long time, supporter. Thank you so much for signing up when I was just charging one time. But I have ongoing fees and I need to pay the bills and et cetera, et cetera. It was a fantastic email. And the new pricing is like just so ridiculously cheap. I'm like, sold, take my money. Yeah. Right. And so I wrote back and I'm like, hey, great email. Thank you for, explaining this and happy to pay you more. Right. So yeah, I think, we kind of get twisted up in knots over those kinds of things. Yeah. But if you have customers that love you, and you're treating them fairly, I think people get it. Like, oh yeah, I can see that there's an imbalance here, and yeah, we can make a change. So, how did you settle on pricing for Flipper Cloud? Like, what did you consider, or was it the first thing? Was like the first thing you thought of, the thing we see today, or did you go through some permutations on that?
Yeah, we went through a lot of permutations, and Steve and I are the only two in the company. So he does most of the design and stuff like that. I do most of the back end, and we both cross over. We're real big on standards and stuff, so using the same things in all of our apps so we can work and stuff like that. But business stuff we always do together, which is good because we have, like you guys obviously probably find that you have different things that you bring to the table. So I think like the goal is like we just want everybody who's using Flipper to use this, mostly just because like it will make your Flipper life better. Like if you're already using Flipper, it will make your life better. So like we want people to use it. We don't want them to like not want to use it just because, it's paid versus open source or something like that. That's like one thing we factored in. And so I think initially we were like, well, what if we just came up with like a small plan of some sort, like 3 plans, like everybody does, like whatever, nickel, bronze, and gold, or, that kind of idea. On Boxout, we have basic, plus, and premium. So, I mean, again, it's just like you make 3 plans, you bucket people in and move on with life. So we started with that. And the thing we were noticing was like, LaunchDarkly split rollout.io, which is not rollout that we were talking about earlier, but there's like several of these that exist and have pricing. And I like went down through all of them. I'm sure you also do this, but like did a little analysis and I'm like, these people charge a lot of money for feature flags. I was like, it's crazy. Like, I mean, it's not crazy. Like if people are paying it, it's totally sane. But I was like, it's just kind of mind blowing to me. I'm like, okay, I pay whatever, like 10, 15 bucks a month or maybe 25 bucks a month for like some of the organizations that I have on GitHub. And I'm like, if I charge $20 for like, or $40 or $50 for one seat in a feature flag app, like, are they getting more value from that or from GitHub? It's difficult for me to say something that's been around for 8 years, acquired by Microsoft and all this stuff that like, it's almost like, how can I charge that? But then I always try to remind myself like, well, yeah, but they have like millions and millions of customers. So that was kind of like a lot of the analysis was just like, well, what price point are people at? Because you don't want to like price super cheap and then have people be like, well, they must be cheap. And you don't want to price super expensive if you don't feel you're delivering that kind of value to people. So I looked at what the market was at, which seems to be somewhere in the like 40 to 50 a seat range with, different levels of freemium to get people in. And then after that, Steve and I talked and we were like, we just want people to use it. So like, what if we just have like a 25 bucks a month plan, for like some number of like 2 people. And then the value with cloud, I feel like that's the hard thing is like, it's brand new. So how do you tell what the value is? But like for you guys, you can have like metered billing, that makes sense. Cause like the more I use of your service, the more value I'm getting. And so, the more money you should make. And obviously there's other things you probably like differentiate on, but like for us, we're like, well, right now, initially what we're offering is like, everything kind of in one place, and we help keep it all in sync and some of that kind of stuff. And we're like, it really doesn't cost us a lot to do that. We have ideas down the road for analytics and other things that will cost a lot. So we can figure that out later. But we're like, we didn't really have like a good value metric other than like the number of developers. So like the number of people that are using it, if you have, 2 developers, it is less, useful, or 1 developer, it's less useful to have it than if you have like, 10, 20, like whatever. And so we were like, well, if that's going to be the case, having like a $25 plan and then like a, I don't know, whatever, like a $500 plan, and then like or maybe a $250, $300 plan and like a $500 or $600 plan. And then like a call us for more kind of a thing. We're like going from 25 to like 300 or something just felt like a lot. And we didn't want to have like 8 different plans, in between and come up with adamantium and every other metal. So it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? Like realistically, we've always hated per seat pricing. Like Steve and I both have just kind of, I remember when GitHub switched to per seat pricing and I was like, I mean, whatever's in the interest of, a shareholder, cool. But like, I really hate, per seat pricing. But I was like, you know what? It just really actually makes the most sense. Like it is the thing that gives your organization more value. In this case, like more developers using it means more things to keep in sync and more things to like keep track of changes and stuff for, and more things where permissions matter. So it was like, okay, that actually makes the most sense. We need to do that. What do we charge? And so we went back and forth on that for a while. Like, do we just make it $10 a month? And like, hopefully everybody's just like, well, that's a no-brainer. I'll just do it. Or do we make it $50 a month like everybody else? But we were like, that just felt like too much. So we were like, okay, let's just pick kind of in the middle. So it was really scientific. Do a bunch of research. Yeah. See what other people are actually charging for it. What kind of value people are then, you assume they're getting, and find, the value metric that makes the most sense. Interesting. Like a lot of people for feature flags charge based on monthly, like active users in your app, because they assume you're going to pass that user through every feature flag. And the reason they do that, I think, is just because of, again, the analytics side. Like if you're actually sending each feature check, that's a lot of data, because you can have, GitHub would have, hundreds of feature checks on any page rendering. And, some of them are in a loop where you're checking it for every single like listed org or issue or things like that. So it's easy to generate a lot of data, like maybe an exception app would get. And if that was the case, then yeah, you want to, bill based on that. But we're not doing anything with that right now. So we're just going to start with like what makes sense. It's like, here's like the cheapest we think it would make sense at. Here's like where everybody else is at. And we're just going to kind of go in the middle, and we'll see how adoption goes. And then if it goes well, cool. If it's struggling, then like we've had a few people who are like, I don't know if I can quite pay that much. Okay, here's your discount. Like just, like I just want you using this, giving me feedback, like that's fine. And then we'll hammer out the pricing, because we basically just threw a dart after like hours of discussion. So
yeah, we've been there, we've done that. I too dislike the per seat pricing, but I agree. Like it makes a lot of sense in this case. And when you get to that point, when you do the analytics stuff, you could sell as an add-on. It's like, oh, you want the data pack too? There you go, right? And when we started Honey Badger, we were really turned off by what Airbrake had done with their pricing and being really limited based on traffic. And so that's why we decided like, we don't want to do that. And we decided the key limiting factor that we could tier on was the number of projects. We figured like bigger teams will have more projects, and so they can pay more. And that worked out, except for, again, for those people that, only had one project and they were sending us all this traffic.
Yeah.
But what really changed our minds, even more than that, because we were just willing to bear that, but really came down to it was like microservices became a thing. And these small teams would all of a sudden have 5 and 10 and 20 little microservice apps they wanted to track independently. And like our pricing just didn't work for them. Like I can't spend that much just for my little, 2-person team. Right. And so I was like, oh yeah, that does make sense. And so we flipped it around so that, okay, well, if your overall traffic is low, then you don't have to pay us so much. So.
What's funny is I looked at your website for a while last night, and I looked at everything but the pricing. And first off, I love it. There's so much good stuff on it, like super fantastic work. I just enjoyed reading it. I'm like listening to some previous episodes and like looking at, I felt like I completely immersed, like I'm full on Honey Badger this morning. So
awesome.
But but like, so you are metered based on basically what the traffic that people send to you. That's
yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm that. Cool.
Yeah.
It's tough because if you're a new Honey Badger customer, you're coming in, you're like, well, what pricing makes sense for me? Like, you don't know how much traffic you're sending, and it's hard. Like with cell phone minutes, you're like, oh, I know how much I talk per month, right? Or with like user seat pricing, you're like, well, I know how many people I have on my team, right? It's easy. Yep. But with the traffic, it's like, I don't know. And so that's another reason why we didn't.
Well, and this was like back like whatever 9 years ago when like very few people were doing metered billing too. Yeah. So it was like a new concept to everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I remember talking about that a lot with gauges, like metered billing. We ended up doing 3 plans and just saying contact us for more. And then we had some hidden plans in Spreedly that didn't show up on our website, but like for bigger customers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, metered I feel like works better like with some kind of like in that instance, like look, it's cool if you just somebody does this. They do like a 2-month rolling average or a 3-month rolling average, which I thought was cool too. Like if you use a little more 1 month, but less the next month, like we don't really care. That's kind of been our approach to billing is like, look, we got to charge you something so that it's worth it for us to keep doing it. But like, we want this to make sense for both of us. Like we're not going to, not to pun, but like, we're not going to badger you into higher prices or whatever. Like, but at the same time,
write that down.
Exactly. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of like how I always have approached it. And so metered pricing is interesting, like with like some kind of like forgiveness built into it. I feel like I like that idea.
Yeah. That forgiveness was what was missing with Airbrake, I think, primarily. Like, because back then it was like, if you did metered billing, it was like, this is the number of whatever events that you get. And then it's like, I just cut you off basically. Or I just remember having those issues where like, if you hit the limit, then it was like, you're on your own. And that just feels terrible from a user customer standpoint.
Yeah. You can hit that with like a really bad exception and high traffic. Yeah. I mean, I remember that with like everything in Haystack was like rolled up. It was rolled up based on, just a super simple algorithm, and if you don't have that, you can have one exception that just blows your entire limit. We had that happen at BoxOut with, I don't even remember what the exception was, but it literally just ate through our entire Sentry thing. And I was like, then we upgraded the plan so we could get more. I think it was JavaScript tracking. We didn't even care about it. So we just,
it's always JavaScript.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
It's always JavaScript.
Yes.
It was probably like some like old legacy version of IE that, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The forgiveness is key, I think, to having a great relationship with your customer. And the truth is like, we're softies. Like, we have people on a regular basis emailing us and saying, hey, I'm sorry. I just sent you, 1.5 million errors yesterday and my plan limit is 150,000, but can I just get by for the rest of the month without paying you more? And it's like, all right, fine. And so we flipped a little switch that allows them to have, the rest of the traffic for the month.
What's that switch? How does that, is it just, you just wrote some code and like you cache the code or it's fast enough so it's fine?
Yeah. So our internal admin tool just pushes I guess it's a Redis key.
Okay.
And it's like, so we have a daily check. So we look back at the usage and say, okay, well, are you past your quota yet? Mm-hmm. And if you're past your quota, then we'll add a limit, right? And so we just have a flag in Redis that says, oh, this customer is exempt until such and such time, right? And so that daily check will be like, just ignore them.
Yeah, we have used Redis a lot like that.
What part? A lot. I mean, everybody does. Like, and part of me, like I feel like that's where Redis gets a lot of its market share, is that kind of easy, quick stuff. So I've been thinking about that a lot we don't have to talk about it, but like in Flipper, like I've been calling it controls. So they're like these, so we have it in SpeakerDeck. Like in SpeakerDeck, we have quality, and quality like defaults to 90, but some people are like, these aren't clear enough. And so we're like, okay, 100. Before we couldn't do that. And I was like, well, I need some way to just say like, this is the setting for this person. If it doesn't exist for that, then fall back to a default, And I was like, that would actually fit. Like Flipper has flipper.enabled ? Like feature name and then like actor. And I was like, that's the same as like a config. It's just instead of being like true false response, you're returning like some other typed, piece of data. I feel like that would be every app that I've worked on. I've wanted that. And Flipper like already is basically just like a key value thing with some Ruby logic on top of it. So I'm like, now that we have, syncing and other stuff, I'm like, I totally just need to build that in because I desperately want it. Like on box out, I want to say like, what's your graphic limit or what kind of, it's not for like secrets. It's for like configuration, things to like, that you want to hot reload. You don't want to, and then you just have, memoization and caching and all those layers built in, just like they're built into Flipper or whatever you use. So yeah, that's why I asked about the switch, because I was like, I love that idea of controls, and I'm always curious how people do it. And I feel like most people do it in Redis, and they do it because it's easy there, but not necessarily like that they, prefer to have that be the place, or because then you got to remember to clean it up otherwise that'll just keep growing. So, but yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I love where you're going with that, because like in every billing system I've ever written, there's always this notion of limits per plan. Like a plan has certain, project limit or user limit or whatever. But you always want to be able to override that, and comp something to a customer, right? Oh, I just need another user, right? Okay, well you can have another one, right? And so there's always the user limit field on the plans table, let's say, but then there's also a user limit field on the accounts table so that you can override. So if that's nil, it just falls back to the plan. But if it's got a value, then use that value instead, right? So you could totally use something like that with Flipper, like kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, I definitely I have it in my mind. I just have to like sit down and do it. The only thing that's hard with that is like you have an explosion in your cardinality, because if you can have one setting for like all 1 million users, like Flipper, all the Flipper data is designed to be able to be like, basically you can read all your features and all their data in like one request. And then the dynamic parts of it go in like Ruby, or the dynamic parts someday will go in whatever other, language support we add. And so I try to control cardinality just because I've worked on GitHub and anything that, and Words with Friends before that. So you work on high traffic things and you see how things fail as well. You don't have a limit. And so you run into that with, Amazon services or anything where it's like, you have a limit, but you can email them and then they'll up the limit. And so it's like, they try to keep people from hurting themselves, but if they really know what they're doing, they'll know, they'll just turn it up. And so I just feel like it's like a core part of every app, and there's like no library or like anything that kind of does it from scratch in a way that to make sure you're not doing N+1 lookups all over the place for every configuration value and stuff like that. So I desperately want it. So I feel like I'm going to build it in probably sooner rather than later. And it's a differentiator. There's only like one or two other places that are doing that. I think ConfigCat is one that I saw that seems to do something kind of like that. But yeah, that's why I was curious.
Yeah, cardinality is a killer. Like when way back in the day, when we first attempted to use Elasticsearch to index our customers' exception data, like every exception is a unique snowflake, right? And so like they all have just the union set is very small across all customers, right? And so Elasticsearch has, of course, limits on how many items it's going to track. And once you hit that limit, because they have to distribute that all around the cluster, so they have to limit that. And so we had to come up with some clever ways to normalize that data and feed it into Elasticsearch in a way that won't blow up that cardinality. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I should blog about that someday.
You should. Yeah, I would read it.
One more thing on pricing.
Yeah.
So on the Flipper, you got the Flipper open source thing, and you've got the Flipper cloud, and you've got the self-hosted option with the cloud on your pricing page. Did you think about other ways? Because you talked about Mike. Mike was an inspiration, and Mike, has a particular licensing scheme, right? There's open source, and then there's, it's basically an open core model, right? You want more features, or you want a different license, then you pay for that, right? So did you think about those kind of alternatives for Flipper, and what made you decide on the hosted thing was right for you? Yeah,
I definitely did. That's a really good question. I saw Mike's thing, so that was like my first thought. And also like Robert, the GraphQL gem, he has the same kind of, I think, as Mike, where like you can pay a little bit, and get a different license or get more features, resolvers, cachers, all those kinds of things. I feel like I was trying to think through that with Flipper, and I'm like, well, I could definitely like do that, but like, what's the thing that's painful with open source Flipper? And that's like the problem I would want to solve. And like, the number one things that people kind of brought up were like audit logging of or some kind of audit history. Like they just want to know like who did what when. And then, the other pain, a big one, is like everything is per project and per environment. And there's like, so everybody's got rake tasks and sync scripts and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, I mean, especially when it gets like like GitHub, where you have, hundreds of developers and they're all creating features and going to town. And it's like, you go on your local laptop to like do something and you're like, I don't even know which feature I need to turn on to make this work to like see the feature. And so then you got to like go through the code and figure out where it's hitting and figure out what features get used and how they need to be enabled and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like those were the two things that we saw as like the biggest pain points, were like moving feature data through your environments and having like a history of what's going on. Those were the two like key things. And then the other thing that I feel like long-term is huge is the analytics and the information side that can be done. I've said it before, but like, I'm the kind of person that like, I played NBA, Tecmo basketball and like Tecmo football and Nintendo growing up, and like Tecmo football didn't track any stats. So like I paused after every play and I kept track of passing attempts, rushing attempts, yards, sacks, tackles. Like NBA basketball,
hardcore.
it was better because they kept track of everything, but they also kept track of rebounds, but they didn't do them correctly. Like I started noticing I'm like, I know I had more than 10 rebounds in this game. This isn't right. And so I started keeping, and I had my own rebound ledger. So I was like, I've always been into stats, I guess is like, and again,
apparently,
thinking through like what the problems were with open source is like, well, you want to know like, is a feature being checked or not? And if you set it to 25% of actors, like kind of how many people does that mean? And like, is it actually returning that? And like at GitHub, we used, StatsD and stuff like that to kind of figure some of that out. And then we also eventually used other things like Datadog and stuff like that. And so it was like, but like, I don't necessarily have that on every project that I set up and stuff. So I was like, but these are things that I want every time I use Flipper. And so if I'm going to want them every time, and probably other people are struggling with them every time, then those probably and those are the things that are the hardest to build because they're unique to the setup. So like if you want to have analytics tracking, you got to have some thread in the background that's keeping track of stats and shipping off events and doing that kind of stuff to some kind of endpoint. And then that endpoint is going to have to do a lot of work to store the raw data, crunch up reports. Like, again, you guys totally familiar with that. So like, but like, that's not something you just want to solve in open source. Like I was just like that, even with like, or like for each customer, it's like, I don't want to write like analytics rollup adapter to work with Redis and to work with Mongo and to work with Postgres and like everything. Like I was like, there's some things that just make sense to centralize. And so I think that's why I went that route. And also just, that was what I had done in the past with Harmony Engages, was like SaaS. I just understood that. I was like, I've never licensed anything. I don't even look at licenses. Like, I mean, other than legality, just to make sure I'm not like breaking laws, but like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, I use MIT because everybody uses MIT and Ruby. Like that's, there's probably other licenses. I don't know what they are. So, so I think that's kind of why I didn't go down that route.
Have you thought about A/B testing features?
Yeah, that comes up. I feel like that. I mean, for me, where I sit on that is like I don't A/B test stuff. I think, like you guys said, you don't do it either, and I feel like I don't really have the desire. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but like to just sit there and like micromanage the revenue or like the color of a button or like all these kinds of. I just don't care about that. So it doesn't interest me. I don't personally do it. I wouldn't know how to solve it right for people. There's other services out there, Optimizely, et cetera, that are huge. But everybody that uses feature flags immediately is like, oh, this is the same thing as A/B tests. Like, why doesn't this do A/B tests? Or, I'm already doing A/B tests, like, et cetera. So there's been several people that have asked. And so probably someday, like, if your customers want something, like you build it. I wouldn't know how to build it correctly for them right now. And that would detract from just trying to get people who are using Flipper currently on board, which is like goal number one. It's just like, if you're using Flipper, like just make it a no-brainer that like this is something you use. So that's the only reason why I haven't, is I'm not sure how much I believe in it. And if people want to do it, that's totally fine. And I could see it being supported at some point, but like, it just feels like different. Like to me, they're different things. And maybe what you do is there's a better way with like, once you have those raw stats, you use like some sort of export, Zapier, like, or Zapier, whatever it is. You have glue between two disparate systems. that they use the data, but I don't know that I want to have an A/B testing company. But I actually had like a year after I left GitHub, people who were working on maintaining Flipper internally, were like, hey, we're like looking at doing a lot of A/B testing, and they had two different things, which obviously I was involved
in. Didn't GitHub release a tool that did A/B testing in Ruby or something? I feel like there was something back in the day, or like
there was
Scientist. Are you talking about Scientist?
Yeah, Scientist. Yeah, I was going to say 5 years ago, or within the past 5 years, I saw something.
It's more for like code changes to make sure that you can try an old way and a new way and test the performance. Before
that's
they go
right.
out.
Yeah.
Yep, but it's the same.
Yeah.
That I love, and I feel like that's totally up Flipper's alley too. Is like this idea.
Okay. Yeah.
Server side, tools to like help you release software more safely. Like to me, I love that. I'm just less excited about the A/B side. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. The Scientist thing was like maybe a little bit closer to what I was thinking versus like product.
Oh, gotcha.
Like, I don't know. Product feature, maybe. I don't know. I probably could have phrased it a little better. But
I had not thought about that at all.
You said you love stats, and I thought like, how can I get this guy collecting more stats?
What's crazy is like I've never thought of like the Scientist functionality in Flipper, but that makes total sense. Like
it seems similar to me.
I think I owe you a percentage of the company now.
Totally.
The first one's free.
Yeah, I got to put a plug in for Scientist. We recently used that because we were upgrading our Elasticsearch cluster from 6 to 7. And so we spun up a new cluster, filled it with data, and then we're like, okay, let's see, how does it work compared to our old cluster?
I didn't realize we used Scientist for that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's great. So it really helped me like realize, okay, I won't blow up the world if I deploy this new thing. So it's quite nice.
Yeah, and the key thing with that is I love having the A/B execution and like deciding whether or not to run the B, and like, and that was even what I see that as like, it's more like, A to B down rather than A or B. It's like, we're always going to return A, but sometimes we'll do this other one, and that's, I remember using that so much. It's really valuable. So, and hooking it up to like, the biggest thing I missed from GitHub, honestly, was back when we still had like StatsD and Graphite, and metrics, whatever, some magic that all the smarter people made internally just for us or whatever. That I miss that. You could just throw anything in StatsD that you wanted, and you never had to think about, it was great. Now that I'm outside, I'm like, I just want to click a button and just have that be like on a thing, but not have to worry about, do I have 100 metrics or 200 metrics or 300? Like, I just want, if it fills up the disk, I'll just delete the disk and start over. It's fine. Like, I just want to click a button and have it appear, so I can just send Scientist stats and all that.
We love that. We use StatsD and send it out to Librado.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Like, I don't have to care. I just pay whatever per month, and they keep track of all of this stuff, metric, and I can make nice little charts whenever I want on demand, and it's great.
I need to check that out in more detail. I haven't looked at Librado.
I think they've rolled that up now. I don't think they actually sell Librado separately, but
okay.
Maybe I don't know, to check that out. But yeah, it's cool stuff. Well, yeah. So if Josh just gave you a huge business opportunity there, then we'll wait for that check in the mail.
Yep. Just don't hold your breath.
Well, John, thanks so much for joining us. This has been awesome.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great.
So for everyone who wants to keep track of you, what's the best way? Twitter, your website? What do you like?
Yeah, either one of those. Like, anything I put on my website, I'll eventually put on Twitter too. So either one of them is fine. And I am now a proud Ghost user, paying Ghost user. So
nice,
cool.
What's your Twitter handle, by the way?
It's at J Nunemaker, which most likely you can't spell, but that's what the show notes are for.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
We'll drop in the show notes. Well, thanks, John, and hope best of luck to you with Flipper Cloud. I'm going to go check it out again, and maybe we'll switch and roll out today.
Hey, if you need somebody to pair with, you know where to go.
All right, sounds good.
Nice.
Thanks. This has been an episode of FounderQuest. If you want to write for the blog, I have to plug that for Star. You know where to go because you've heard the podcast outro so many times by now. If you want to check out John, we'll have some links in the show notes to his Twitter and his blog and Flipper Cloud. And if you want to do some work for Honeybadger, Josh has been hiring like crazy.
Yeah.
And got a bunch of contractors. Kevin said in Slack the other day, he's like, yeah, they're like Pokemon. Got to collect them all. But thanks so much for listening, and hope you all have a great day.
FounderQuest is a weekly podcast by the founders of Honey Badger. Zero instrumentation, 360-degree coverage of errors, outages, and service degradations for your web apps. If you have a web app, you need it. Available at honeybadger.io. Want more from the founders? Go to FounderQuestPodcast.com. That's one word, where you can access our huge back catalog of episodes. FounderQuest is available on iTunes, Spotify, and other purveyors of fine podcasts. We'll see you next week.